horror tunnel. The night was dense, shrouded in an unsettling fog that curled around the trees like a living thing. Ehsan and his friends, eager for a thrill, had heard whispers of an abandoned railway tunnel on the outskirts of town, a place known only as the Echoing Maw. No one knew its origins or why it had been left to rot beneath the weight of the earth, but tales told of screams that rebounded off its walls long after they were heard. As they stood at the tunnel's mouth, a cold wind whistled out, carrying with it a low, almost mournful moan. Ehsan exchanged a look with Zara, whose usual smirk faltered for a moment. "This is stupid," muttered Ahmed, shoving his hands deeper into his pockets. But it was too late to back out now. The thrill had taken hold. The group switched on their flashlights, beams slicing through the gloom like knives. The tunnel's walls were slick with moisture, dark patches where water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Moss and fungus clung to the stone, the air thick with a damp, decaying scent. They ventured deeper, the crunch of gravel under their feet the only sound, until a sudden thud echoed from further in. Zara's flashlight wavered, revealing the outline of something half buried in rubble. Ehsan's heart drummed as he approached and saw the tattered remnants of what looked like a coat, frayed and stained with what might have been blood. "Let's go back." Ahmed's voice was barely above a whisper, eyes darting between shadows that seemed to shift. But before anyone could move, a distant voice called out, distorted and metallic as though passed through an ancient radio. "Help me." The lights flickered, and a cold hand gripped Ehsan's arm. He spun around, flashlight casting wild arcs of light, but no one was there. The silence that followed was heavier than before, pressing down until every breath felt like a struggle. A shiver skated down Ehsan's spine as he realized they weren't alone in the Echoing Maw. The echo of their breaths seemed to come back at them, distorted, as if multiple unseen entities mimicked their every move. The faint smell of smoke drifted through the damp air, an inexplicable reminder of burning wood. Ehsan glanced at Zara, whose wide eyes mirrored the fear knotting in his chest. "Did you hear that?" Zara whispered, her voice barely audible over the thundering in their ears. Before Ehsan could respond, a soft scraping sound came from behind them. It grew louder, echoing along the tunnel walls, as if sharp claws were being dragged across stone. Ahmed took a step back, panic setting in his features. "We need to get out, now." He turned, but the path behind them was obscured by a thick, unnatural shadow that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. It wasn't just darkness. It felt alive, watching, waiting. Suddenly, a flicker of light illuminated a silhouette further down the tunnel. It was a child, or at least it looked like one. She wore a torn, faded dress and stood motionless, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her eyes were empty voids, and when her mouth opened, the sound that came out was not a cry or a word, but an echo of the group's own footsteps. Ehsan felt frozen, his limbs leaden as the child took a step forward, her bare feet making no sound. Zara stumbled backward, her flashlight clattering to the ground and spinning wildly, casting erratic beams that only made the scene more terrifying. "What do you want?" Ehsan shouted, his voice breaking. The child stopped, tilting her head the other way. For a brief, horrifying moment, the tunnel seemed to close in on them, walls narrowing, the air pressing against their skin. A low hum started, vibrating through their bones. Ahmed shouted something, but it was lost in the rising noise, a chorus of whispers and mutters overlapping into a deafening crescendo. The figure of the child shimmered, dissolving into tendrils of black mist that slithered along the ground like serpents. Before they could react, the mist wrapped around Zara's ankles, dragging her forward. She screamed, clawing at the wet stones as Ehsan and Ahmed lunged to grab her. The tendrils burned cold where they touched, numbing fingers and sapping strength. "Hold on," Ehsan yelled, gripping Zara's arm as tightly as he could. But the force was too strong, and with a final, gut-wrenching pull, she was wrenched out of their grasp and vanished into the deeper shadows. Her scream lingered, then faded, as if carried off by the tunnel's relentless echoes. Ehsan and Ahmed stared at the spot where Zara had disappeared, both too stunned to move. The silence that followed was suffocating, punctuated only by their ragged breathing. The tunnel around them seemed to shift and pulse, the walls bleeding with streaks of dark, viscous liquid. "We have to find her," Ahmed said, his voice breaking. He stumbled forward, but Ehsan grabbed his arm. "Number, we need to get help," Ehsan said, though his own legs felt like they might give out at any moment. But Ahmed shook him off, driven by something deeper than fear. He pressed on into the tunnel, his flashlight barely penetrating the oppressive dark. Ehsan hesitated, torn between running for help and following Ahmed. The whisper came again, softer now but unmistakable. "Join us." Ahmed disappeared into the black, leaving Ehsan alone. The shadows seemed to close in, and a new sound filled the tunnel. A slow, deliberate tapping, as if someone unseen was marking each second that passed. Panic surged in Ehsan, and he took a step back toward the mouth of the tunnel. His flashlight sputtered, and he fumbled for the spare battery in his pocket, fingers trembling so violently he nearly dropped it. The tapping grew louder, closer, and he could feel the cold breath of the tunnel's secrets creeping against his skin. Finally, the beam of light returned, illuminating the tunnel once more. But what it revealed made his heart seize in his chest. Rows of eyes, disembodied and glistening, watched him from the walls, shifting and blinking in unison. They followed his every move, hungry and unblinking. He turned and ran, feet pounding against the gravel as the whisper trailed him, mocking and endless. The exit seemed farther than before, stretching out as if the tunnel itself conspired to keep him trapped. The last thing Ehsan heard was a collective hiss from the eyes, echoing in a symphony of terror as he stumbled into the light of dawn. When he collapsed outside, breathless and shaking, the tunnel behind him seemed silent, ordinary, as if it had never been the vessel of his nightmares. The next morning, search parties found nothing but flashlights abandoned near the entrance, their batteries inexplicably drained. The story of the echoing maw spread like wildfire, growing with each retelling. But Ehsan and his friends were never seen again, lost in the endless echoing dark of the tunnel.